This here is the only extant picture of me as a hippie. So, that actually, this photo of me is that I'm in this photo the same age that my grandson is now. So it's back in 1970. Little did I know that my days were numbered, and that I was a convinced atheist, and there's only one thing I wanted out of life was to be an artist. But my days were numbered, and eventually, about within a year or so, I would be a Christian, and the whole trajectory of my life would change. You know, when it came to the whole art scene, is that I really appreciated a number of different artists and their styles. I liked Jacques-Louis David, and this is The Death of Marat, and he is a French neoclassicist, and I like his precision and attention to detail, and that certainly resonated with me. But that's not all. Actually, I have some of my early paintings, so I haven't done any paintings for a long time now. But also another style that really resonated with me when it came to art was the Impressionism. And by the way, just as for a little bit of art history, Van Gogh is not an Impressionist. Is that he doesn't fit in that category, at least from what I recall from my college days. But Claude Monet definitely is. And here we have one of his pictures, a woman with a parasol facing left. But I love his style, I really do. And it's such a painterly effect, and he really has a grasp of light and color. And I'm still drawn to that so much. I have my own paintings. Maybe one of these days I will show some of those on a future broadcast. I actually have a couple of them in my house here that go and date back to some of the very first efforts that I made at painting and drawing, and so I might show those a little bit later sometime, not today. But when it came to as far as the message or the headspace that I was at in my life at that time, that it really resonated with me that Edvard Munch, The Scream, because even though his work is not technically a nihilistic work, that what his work is that it's really he essentially has captured, and I think masterfully, in this particular drawing, that he's captured the existential angst that had gripped my soul at even that young age that I was at, and also the human anxiety. I was convinced at that point in my life that life had no objective meaning, that there was no purpose to life, and there was no meaning to life, and ultimately there was no value to life. And I never could figure out, and that's why I was kind of drawn to the whole hippie scene, because that I couldn't find any of that meaning, purpose, or value. And so I figured, well, why not? You know, my nihilism was the parent of my hedonism. So in other words, my belief that life didn't have any true meaning is what gave rise to my indulgence of my personal appetites. So I want to share with you, and that's what this whole project is about, is why I'm a Christian. And I want to give you the reason and the evidence for why I'm a Christian, not just speaking from my personal experience, but I wanted to kind of set the table today with what was going on in my life at that stage of my life before I became a Christian back there in the 1970s. Is that styles, they come and go. And I know that young people are thoroughly convinced that the look that they've adopted is one that they want to continue for the rest of their lives. But sometimes things change. So we want to talk a little bit about this today, about why I'm a Christian, and is there any real meaning to life? We'll be right back. So getting back to the screen here, and that in this particular artwork captured the headspace that I was in, and this sense of existential angst and human anxiety. I think it was Jean Paul Sartre. I think that I got his name right, but Sartre. He said in his work, The Myth of Sisyphus, he raised the question. He starts actually in the book by saying this, is that the only serious philosophical question is suicide. So should we just go on living? Because he was, now Sartre wasn't a nihilist, but he was an existentialist. And he, of course, came up with the ideas that, or he didn't come up with it, but he embraced the idea that we create our own meaning. But as you'll see a little bit later, that's just an exercise in futility when you really think about life on the grand scheme of things. And so for me, I had come to the conclusion that there was no God. There was no point to life. Why get a good education and make a bunch of money so that you can do some of the stuff that you want to do, and then, buy some of the things that you want to buy and then die. It just didn't it seemed to me that life was so stupid. And like I said, I'd given myself over to the philosophy of nihilism. Now, that may not be a term that you're familiar with, but certainly the philosophy is. I found a guy on YouTube, and you can find almost anything on YouTube, but I want to share with you a clip of a guy who gives a pretty succinct definition of nihilism. And so let's watch that at this.
I am a nihilist, he said with trepidation. People's opinion of nihilism tends to be pretty negative, and I've always found that odd, even before I realized that I identified with the two most popular forms of nihilism. These would be existential nihilism, the idea that life is inherently meaningless, and moral nihilism, the idea that right and wrong are merely opinions, not things that really exist in any objective sense.
And what he says there really would have resonated with me when I was younger, was existential nihilism. So life does not have any objective meaning. And then moral nihilism, that all morality is just a matter of opinion. And actually, as we go on in these little video visits of Why Think Differently, is that I hope to challenge, or at least to get you to think differently about those two concepts. Before we wrap up, I want to just share with you, like I mentioned a little bit earlier on in this particular broadcast, is that there's a quote that I think that sums it up perfectly when if we adopt the view that God doesn't exist, and so is there any real meaning to life? And I think that the absolute best quote that I've ever stumbled across about this is one by Bertrand Russell. He was a famous philosopher and mathematician back in the day. And here's what he said. And you can tell he's back in the day by his hairstyle, But he says, that man is the product of causes that had no prevision of the end they were achieving, that his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves, and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocation of atoms. So in other words, it's just an accident why we exist, an accident of nature, why human beings, why you exist, why I exist. And then he goes on to say this, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve individual life beyond the grave. That's code talk for saying when you're dead, you're dead. And then he says that all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, and all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction. There's the nihilism coming in. It's destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. The heat death of the universe, that's where we're all headed. And so that's our destiny. And so how can we find any true meaning when that's the true outcome of our lives? Then he goes he goes on to say this. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, I think he's overstating his case, but he says, all these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. I have to laugh at it, to tell you the truth, because, Bertrand Russell, no question about it, he was a towering intellect. But just because he is a towering intellect in one field does not mean that he has spoken truth philosophically or even religiously. And that's the problem. We are so smitten with some of these thought leaders that we never do challenge or give any pushback, serious pushback. And I think that that's the role of the Christian, is to be ultimately counter-cultural. That's why Christianity, I think, appeals to me, and particularly today, it's certainly counter-cultural. And so I would encourage you to think differently. I remember reading back into the day one Bible verse, because I tried to read the Bible a lot of times, and I would just run out of steam after about Genesis chapter 5, because all of the begats would just beat me down. And if you try to read the Bible from cover to cover, you're probably going to be sorely disappointed, because a lot of it is just it's just boring, and it is hard to understand. And we need someone to kind of walk us through and help us to understand the big story and what it's truly all about. But there was one book in the Bible that really resonated with me because of its actually nihilistic perspective, at least in the beginning chapters, or actually most of the chapters throughout it. And that's the book of Ecclesiastes. That's where the Byrds got their song. Byrds and Bob Dylan, to everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a time for every season under heaven, and so on and so forth. I think it was a folk singer who actually wrote the song initially. But nevertheless, it was taken straight out of the book of Ecclesiastes. But in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse number 2, we read this: meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. And at that stage in my life, that's what resonated with me. But it was the quest for meaning that drove me into my spiritual journey, and I hope that it will also play a part in yours. So that's it for now, and I hope you will catch me next time when I share a little bit more about this project, Why Think Differently?